Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Press, and I'm the founder of Archers Raiders, a fan group designed to unite politically progressive fans, students, and alumni of the Morehouse Maroon Tigers and Colgate Raiders. This is the sixth installment of our interview and profile series called The Remarkable Student Athletes of Morehouse and Colgate. My guest today is Alejandro Coury, a sophomore economics major at Colgate University. Alejandro is a midfielder for the Colgate Raiders men's soccer team. He's been a key contributor on the team during both of his seasons at Colgate and was named to the All-Patriot League third team for the 2022 season. Alejandro, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I'd like to start by asking about your journey to Colgate and your career so far. So when you were attending and playing in youth soccer at you said you went to a couple of different schools. What was the recruitment process like for you, and which schools were you considering?
Yeah, I think I didn't really start taking my college career too seriously until around my junior year of high school. Um, and by that point, I think I had sort of identified that I wanted to go to a Division I school, but one that still had good academics and maybe on the smaller side. Because growing up in Maine, a lot of kids in my area went to the NESCACs. So I was sort of looking for something similar to that. And so I think Colgate really fit the bill for me. It's a smaller school, but still has Division I athletics. And the other schools I was talking to Brown a little bit, but things didn't work out. And then James Madison University in Virginia was one that if I wanted to go for like a bigger university type experience, that's one that I was interested in. And ultimately that was the decision that came down to is Colgate or James Madison. And I chose Colgate.
Gotcha. Okay, and that I think that makes perfect sense. Definitely, you coming from a smaller town, wanting a college experience, it's going to be more intimate than perhaps some of like the larger state schools, great academics, and I guess at that point when you were recruited, they had experienced a good deal of success on the field as well, right?
Yep. Yeah, they were. I think it was during COVID at the time, but um, I think they were just coming off a three-peat of Patriot League championships. So
Gotcha. Okay. So at what point did Colgate start expressing serious proactive interest in you?
yeah, it was a pretty quick process. So our old assistant coach, he departed the program after last year, but he was formerly an assistant coach at UNH, and um, seeing as New Hampshire is in my area, he'd seen me a lot playing, and once he heard that I was still uncommitted, they reached out, and I think within like 2 weeks I had committed. It was also during my postgraduate year, so things had to move pretty quick. And I knew during COVID that it was going to be pretty hard to get a position on any team with the extra year of eligibility that players were being granted. So I was really happy with it.
So did they have, it's so interesting, I guess being recruited during that COVID year, did they have the opportunity to I guess see you play for is it Worcester Academy? That's how that I get the
Yeah, Worcester.
pronunciation right. Worcester. Okay. Did so
Yep.
they had the opportunity to like see you play for them, and that's kind of how that starts?
No, so I actually never played in a competitive game for Worcester. We just
Okay.
did like intra-squad scrimmages due to the COVID regulations. But Simeon is the assistant coach's name. He had seen me just from watching academy games. Like he had seen me from maybe a couple years back, so he knew who I was as a player. I'd also been to a Colgate ID camp. It's actually the only ID camp I'd ever gone to as a soccer player. And so they were somewhat familiar with me.
Gotcha. Okay. I can dig it. All right. So as you reflect on your soccer career at Colgate so far, what would you say has been the most memorable experience?
Um, I think the first the win over Providence in our season opener this year was pretty memorable. Um, it was it was definitely a game that I feel set the precedent for our season. And it was just, I mean, my at the time my best friend was on Providence, so it was nice to get the win. And my parents were also in attendance.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I know that was a huge upset. I think some like the preseason standings for like the Patriot League had Colgate pretty far down, and so it's one of those things where no one outside of the program really gave you guys much of a chance. But just as I recall watching it, really a phenomenal, inspired performance. And you're actually the third person as I talked to Max and Bobby. They said the same thing. Those are kind of one of the most memorable games of their careers. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So now I want to shift gears a bit. People often have the misconception that athletes are one dimensional, lacking the range to speak on different important issues facing society today. But the fact is that pro and college level athletes are often intimately connected to their communities and the challenges facing them. I think this is especially true of Morehouse men and Colgate graduates, excuse me. So my first question is actually about the political climate at Colgate. Um, During your, I guess, year and a half at Colgate so far, have you noticed any specific political issues that have received a lot of interest and discussion amongst your peers?
Yeah, I think definitely the overturning of Roe v. Wade was something that was um pretty pretty well documented. I think a lot of people were outraged about it. I saw a lot of stuff on social media as well. So definitely that. And yeah, I wasn't here during the 2020 election, so not sure about that, but I'm pretty positive that would have been a big talking point on campus as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure I can definitely see how for everyone the Roe v. Wade decision was quite animating, but I can definitely see how that's something that younger people would take a specific interest in as well. And would you say
Right.
that Colgate, the students of Colgate, in your experience, are pretty politically engaged?
I think uh, I don't know if I would say I think there's definitely some people who are. Um, I think if you want to find that on campus, it's definitely there. Um, I think there's also maybe some people who aren't and are in a position of privilege where they don't have to be thinking about it, which is, it is what it is, but it's a little disappointing.
Mm,
But yeah, I think there definitely are. I mean, there's many like student groups across campus um, concerning stuff like that.
gotcha. Gotcha. I can yeah, I'd imagine that's kind of how it is at most places. You're going to get certain people who will be more engaged, more interested in what's going on in the world than others, and I think that's definitely understandable, particularly for college students. Um,
Yeah.
all right. So now I want to talk about a few issues being discussed and debated in our national political discourse. And since you're an economics major, we'll start off with a couple questions about political economy. So, since being elected, President Biden has been a big supporter of antitrust law, preventing mergers and breaking up monopolies to protect consumers and workers from large predatory companies. However, conservatives argue that these policies and most regulations in general are bad because they limit economic growth and innovation. In your opinion, are ordinary people better off in an economy with more regulations and antitrust enforcement or less regulations for big corporations?
Yeah, I think antitrust laws are a good thing. to an extent. I think that obviously, like, if you allow big business to sort of take over, then they can monopolize markets. And I think that antitrust laws sort of promote an environment where there can be that competition, which, could drive prices down, which I think is better off for regular people.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's definitely definitely the idea. And I know it's pretty unique, President Biden's focus on this, his appointment of this uh woman named Lena Khan to, I think
Mhm.
she's like the head of the FTC. She's been really aggressive with that, and I think in the long run we'll see, to your point, that benefiting regular people, consumers, with lower prices. All right. So next question here. So going back to I guess it would have been 2020. No, actually 2016, I think. So when Andrew Yang was running for president, he argued that the metrics we use to measure the health of the economy, primarily GDP, are deeply flawed because they inaccurately assess the quality of life of ordinary Americans. Do you think the way that economists measure economic growth needs to be updated? Why or why not?
Um, yeah, I think that there's definitely some things that GDP leaves out. I think that maybe I think the cost of living in different places is something. Because like real estate or maybe just things that are essential for everyday life the price varies very much. Whereas like cost of living in New York is not comparable to the cost of living in like Missouri or something. Um, I think that, I mean, it's definitely still an important statistic to take, but yeah, I don't think it covers all aspects of life for Americans.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's some great points there, definitely. I mean, even the way we measure unemployment, it only including people who are, I guess, actively searching for
Right.
jobs is a bit flawed. So good unemployment, what are considered good unemployment metrics, in reality, things, particularly for like the poorest communities in America, oftentimes they're not seeing the growth that GDP would suggest that they're seeing. So I think that's
Yeah. There's places where it's more beneficial for unemployed people to like collect welfare than it is to actually work.
hmm. Yeah, that's fair. Okay. All right. So next question here. Immigration is always a topic at the forefront of political discussion come election time. And there are currently hundreds of thousands of people in different parts of the world seeking refuge in America from oppressive governments, gang violence, and war. So I now want to ask you a question about the economics of immigration. Some conservatives support anti-immigration policies because they argue that a tight labor market leads to higher wages and more employment for native-born citizens. Other conservatives uh, make arguments about them coming over here and committing crime. Uh, but liberals and libertarians, on the other hand, typically argue that more immigration is good for the economy because immigrants start businesses, buy goods, and increase the demand for jobs. Generally speaking, do you think an increase in immigration leads to more or less economic growth?
Yeah, I think it definitely leads to more. Like if we have more people coming into the US and there's more purchasing of American made goods and more spending in the economy, then I think the only way to see it is as economic growth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's it's a great point, and I think most of the economic research done on immigration would support that point. It's interesting that when people try to suggest the opposite, there's really not even many reputable studies out there that would suggest that. So I definitely think that that more immigration tends to be good for the economy.
Yep.
All right, so moving on. At this point, it's been a couple of years since George Floyd's murder at the hands of the Minneapolis police, excuse me. During the protests following his death, there was much talk about police reform, with some calling for defunding the police. In the last 2 years, do you think enough has been done to fix police brutality and corruption that poor people often endure in impoverished cities and counties?
No, I do not think enough's been done. I think there's a few like glaring concerns with our policing in this country. I think one of the main ones is that it's not, I think a way to fix maybe some of the issues is maybe like policing isn't seen as a job that many people want. And I think one way to maybe combat that is to make the process to become a policeman like a lot more difficult, and there needs to be a lot more training going into it, proper training like for people of if they have like mental disorders or how to non-violently calm down a situation. And I think one way to do that would be to lower the amount of police that we have, but increase the pay for a policeman and increase the training that they should receive. Because right now I think it's way too easy for someone to just become a cop. Maybe someone who has like just wants to go on a power trip.
Got you. Yeah. So, from what I'm hearing, you think increasing, I guess, the standard of policing, of what it takes to become a police officer would be important, and then increasing the pay to encourage more people to apply, and then get the rigorous training that is necessary, but sometimes in different departments may be ignored. It could go a long way, and I agree. I definitely think proper training and how to de-escalate situations non-violently could be very important.
Yeah.
All right. Next question here is about Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Something you suggested was of great interest to the Colgate student body. So yeah, this decision by the Supreme Court allowed states to make their own abortion laws with no oversight from the government. Some Republican majority states have already attempted to outlaw abortion completely, though they've succeeded at varying degrees depending on the state. What are your thoughts on this? And is there anything you'd like to see elected officials do in response to this?
Yeah, I think my initial reaction was I was just so shocked. I mean, it felt like we were going back in time, like seeing as Roe v. Wade happened almost like 50 years ago now, and we're sort of going back to the way it was before. And I know that it's definitely a sentiment that a lot of people my age and just people in general felt. I think, I mean, I think that the way to combat this is young people in particular need to get out and get to the polls. I mean, that's really the only way. I think that's sort of unfortunate, but in states where it is outlawed, like those people were elected by the citizens of that region or that state, and it's unfortunate, but that's the way they voted. And I think the only way to combat that is just to outvote them.
Got you. Yeah, definitely the political engagement piece very important. And I think we saw a bit of that with these the most recent midterm elections. I think they
Yep.
didn't go as well as many Republican pundits and analysts thought they would, perhaps in part because of sort of the backlash to this Supreme Court decision. So hopefully we see more of that political engagement going forward. All right. And so last but certainly not least, I want to ask you about the prospect of college athletes unionizing. So recently, the College Football Players Association was founded in an attempt to secure long-term medical care, a percentage of media revenue, and a host of other benefits for players. Do you think it's a good idea for college athletes to attempt to unionize? Excuse me.
Yeah, I think especially before NIL, the NIL rulings where student athletes are allowed to make money off their own likeness. I think that it was like college athletes, especially in football and basketball, which are the two biggest markets. I think they were like the schools were making so much money, the NCAAs were making so much money off these athletes, and the fact that they weren't able to get any portion of that, I think, is ludicrous. But yes, like for long-term medical care, especially for like football players who are dealing, the reality is that they very well could be getting CTE from their careers. And the thing is, if you don't make it to the NFL, then, you know, you're not going to have millions of dollars. And, in the NFL, I feel like that's kind of what you're signing up for. But a lot of college kids, maybe you're going to get an education, which you wouldn't have been able to get if not for football. And yeah, I think unionizing is a great solution to that. I mean, it's a shame that they have to do that to even get medical care in this country, but that's the reality. So
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a huge part of it. Yeah, the healthcare is big, especially to your point. Most of these students are not going to be playing professionally, and even then, what the NFL provides for their players post retirement is not much. But to the initial question, yeah, definitely a strong union in pretty much all sectors of society can go a long way to securing benefits for workers and for these top level athletes that make so much money for the school, as you suggested. Um, one would imagine that unionizing could be beneficial for them as well.
yeah, totally agree.
All right, well, that's the last of our questions. Alejandro, thank you again, for taking this time to speak with me, brother. I really do appreciate it, especially on such short notice. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, you as well. Again, thank you for having me.
Of course.